Hello and welcome to the Pilot Podcasts, where we talk with people who have taken unique paths and have some inspiring stories to tell us. My name is Helga and I'm a second-year student at the Chaos Pilots. And today I'm sitting with Javier Esteves,
Yes.
a social entrepreneur, and you have migrated here from Argentina.
Originally from Argentina, yes.
Yeah. So maybe we can start there. You're born and raised in Argentina.
Yes.
Whereabouts?
In Buenos Aires, in the capital city.
Okay.
Yes, born and raised. And migrated a couple of years ago from the country, yes.
And what's your early years background?
So when I was living in Argentina,
Yeah.
I mean, I spent quite a while trying to figure out if university was for me.
Yeah.
Eventually, I ended up really loving psychology as an education. In Argentina, we combine bachelor's with master's. So whenever you go to higher education, at least when I was living there, I guess it's still the same. You are in for like 5 to 6 years in education, really like psychology. But like soon after I began, I decided to migrate. Got a very good job opportunity working in tourism, and I used that as a platform to move away. But my love for psychology is still intact. So if you want to talk about psychology, I'm also ready to go for that.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes.
But did you study psychology then for a few years?
Yeah, I studied for around 2 years. And the university that I was going to was very Freudian. So they really believed in psychoanalysis like the traditional way.
Yeah.
So as I was studying in that school, in that university, I was also taking social psychology classes on the weekends in a school that it was founded by one of the many dissidents of Freud. So one of the many early psychiatrists that they decided that Freudian theory had a lot of different limitations. And the funny thing is that in this other school, it was all about social psychology. So the idea that an individual's mental well-being and mental workings are very much connected to their community. So whenever mental unwellness arises, it's a matter of the person's social constellation and not the person within himself or herself or themselves.
Yeah.
So schizophrenia and psychosis and split personalities, all these very scary conditions, they were being studied from a completely different point than the Freudian. So I was studying both things at the same time and trying to find myself within that spectrum as a psychology student. Yeah.
Okay. So are these two schools of thought?
Yep.
Do they clash or do they sometimes agree with each other?
I mean, I think that like both of them assume that there was something called psychology that should be developed, which in the very beginning it was not so easy to defend. And I think that like both of them agreed that communication was the main tool of social well-being and psychological development. Then in the case of the social psychology school, they really believe that the individual that gets sick, it's getting sick on behalf of a social constellation.
Yeah.
So that unless there's social constellation, which can be anything, it could be one person, 5, it could be family, it could be their community if the family is not alive anymore. Unless the social constellation doesn't heal, the individual will remain sick. Versus more the Freudian view that, of course, it changed, like psychology evolved much more, but like in the Freudian core, you need to focus on the individual and primarily you need to focus on the individual's unconscious. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
It is. It's quite a topic. Yes.
What drew you to this topic originally?
To psychology.
Yeah.
I think that like partly the fact that I've been always very interested in people and human relationships. I don't consider myself somebody that has many skills, but when it comes to people, I'm very passionate.
Okay.
And I think that also my own personal conflicts and growing up, realizing that a lot of the things that were bringing misery to my life, they were not necessarily coming from my own actions or my life decisions over a long period of time, but it was inherited by my family and by also their families. And so suddenly like this genealogy aspect, it was very, very interesting. And that combined with anthropology and with biology. So essentially life through a social lens, not so much chemistry or even like physics and this type of things. Yeah.
And then you stop studying psychology and you go work for G Adventures
Yes.
in Argentina.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a Canadian company. They do group touring. And if you think about it, the way that I was working for this company, which was leading tours from 2 people to 18 people throughout South America, it was like a social experiment after another. Like just coexisting with people, it was a huge anthropological experience. And also being so young and having to get to know people within a holiday framework, a vacation framework, which you would assume that it's all about leisure, but for a lot of people, it was really about personal transformation. It was about this holiday is the first day of my life type of thing.
Wow.
So throughout the experience, I did not only get a lot of information about how other countries work and how other people become people, like for normal education, their expectations in terms of like growing professionally, but also like how creatively challenged you can be at age 45 while traveling in Bolivia and realizing that maybe you are not the person that you want to be anymore and that you want to change, all within a holiday setting. So it was very, very enriching in that sense. Looking back as well, in the moment it was pretty chaotic as well. Yes.
Yeah, G Adventures is a very big company, and they have customers from all over the world, right?
They do, yeah.
Yeah, so you meet a lot of different cultures, and like it's a connection point of people who come. They're all coming to Southern America to travel, but they're coming from different places.
They definitely had a customer base coming like from Britain, from the UK, a lot from Australia and New Zealand as well, and some people from more like Central Europe, like Germany, and they also had like from the Germanic countries. And the funniest thing is that like the company was founded on the premise that people want to travel, but they don't have enough time to travel because they have education and work that demands a lot of their time. So you need to create an experience that is not only ideally deep experience, but also agile. Something that maybe within 10 days, the person gets enough out of a South American experience that they feel that they've been to South America.
Wow.
Which is it's a huge value, like promise. And in the field, I would say that sometimes we delivered and sometimes we didn't, because some of the promises there were, especially in certain countries with low infrastructure, it was pretty complicated to deliver.
I've been on 2 G Adventure tours myself.
Did you?
And I've noticed this element of these like mini social experiments in both of them. It's it's quite interesting how a group of strangers come together. They're all have bought into this experience. We're going to be here for 2 weeks, a month. We're going to travel together. But that's the only buy-in. You have no idea who you are meeting. And how the group is put together. And there's a lot of interesting things that happen on these tours.
Absolutely. And at the same time, you would say that like the offices, they were divided in like different poles. So like, for example, we were like in the south, we were like the south office that was run from Peru. And suddenly like you were setting an experience that from the outside, it looked like very consistent because we're going to a part of the world where everybody speaks the same language and they have kind of like a common background. But then in the field, like it was the responsibility of the chief experience officer. That's how they used to call us, CEO. It was your responsibility to bring a lot of different nuances on like what to expect moving from Chile to Argentina, from Argentina to Bolivia or to Uruguay or to Brazil. So off the record, I'd love to know more about your 2 G Adventures experiences as well.
We can talk about it later.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then you moved to Denmark, or what? Was that straight after working at?
No, it was actually pretty reckless way of getting to Denmark to some extent, because when I finished working with this company, I was convinced in my mind that like that basically, at least for Argentina, like the future was very, very complicated. Maybe some of the listeners or viewers of this podcast, they know a little bit about Latin American politics, but like in a nutshell, we are, at least Argentina, but I think it's common to a lot of South American countries, we are to some extent trapped in a series of like financial loans and systems of like repayment that are very complex and that they are inherited by each coming government. So already back then, we're talking about 80 years ago almost, I realized that things were like very complicated for people to live in Argentina. So I decided to migrate. And in the beginning, I went to Central America, then to Mexico, just traveling because I needed to go through my own transformational trip. And then I ended up in New Zealand which is common among Argentinians because there are different visa opportunities for you to go there. And over there, I met my ex-wife, which turned out to be Argentinian and Italian. And then together we decided to move to Europe.
Okay.
And it's going to sound ridiculous, but back then, in my situation, the only country where I could get a working holiday visa, which is a very common visa scheme, was Denmark. From all countries. It was the only place where I could get a working holiday visa. So we moved to Aarhus, and well, the rest is personal history. So
it was only country in Europe you could get a working holiday visa.
Otherwise, I would have needed to go back to Argentina, get a job, get a bank account, live there for a while, save up a lot of money, show the funds to Germany or to Sweden or to all the other countries that they would offer a working holiday visa, and maybe get a working holiday visa. But with Denmark, it was suspiciously flexible. I guess that maybe it was a moment where they also needed more workers. I don't know. I really didn't dig much into it. I was just happy that I could apply.
Yeah, take the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Fully chance taken. Yeah.
It's from a very privileged European viewpoint. I always get so surprised how hard it is to migrate when you're from outside of Europe and you want to migrate into Europe, and how ridiculously strict these rules are.
Yes. And there are changes coming. Like, for instance, now that after COVID, there is a whole new idea of remote workers being much more welcome, at least seasonally. You have Estonia that a couple of years ago, they created the e-passport, which is a way for you to have what in Denmark would be called a CVR. Okay. You can have a CVR, quote unquote, in Estonia, and you can run your business from Estonia without living in Estonia. So if suddenly you are a person working with, for example, digital businesses, you're a graphic designer or you are a programmer and you want to land your business in the European Union, you can do it with this e-passport. So in that sense, I'm pretty confident that things are going to keep on getting a bit more nuanced for people to have something to do with Europe.
Yeah, some changes in the borders of the world.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
War these days as well.
Yeah.
So pretty complicated, pretty thorny.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you arrive in Denmark, in Aarhus, and which year is that?
That was in late October 2017, which was also a special moment for Aarhus because the city was European Capital of Culture. There was a whole infrastructure of investment and content that still has a ripple effect until today. And when we moved, we knew that we didn't want to live in Copenhagen with my ex-partner because we both came from rather big cities, and we knew that big city life was not necessarily the best to start a new life in Denmark. So we moved to Aarhus, and almost right away we got a hold of this idea of what it's called a forening, roughly translated a civil association.
Yeah.
We got in touch with different platforms like Frontlovene, like X, Institute for X, and we started to get a bit of an idea of how this whole concept of a civil association worked. So I would say that after a couple of months, we were already founding our own forening, that it was called Face to Face, and it was a what we used to call a rave parties for social inclusion. Wow. That was the tagline.
Rave parties for social inclusion.
Literally.
What does that stand for?
Right.
What does it mean?
Well, I mean, I think that it was a combination of our feeling that not only in Denmark, but in other places, the rave scene was a very multicultural, partly because the content of the scene, which is electronic music, came from the internet, like a melting pot of different cultural influences. So it was a very organic place to feel like we belonged when we would go to different rave parties and came across Danish people that they wanted to speak in English, that they were interested about where is it that we're coming from. So that was part of it. And then it was this whole idea that it's still a part of my work, even to these days, which is that the very important stuff can happen in a nighttime setting. So in a nighttime setting, there is a lot of sharing, there is a lot of sense making that can happen much more organically, from understanding how the place that you're living in works, from the experience of a local, or from the experience of an international that has been living here for a while, to just getting a feeling of how open-minded this society is when it comes to gender identity, or when it comes to networks, me being able to do what I want to do in this city thanks to relationships. So it was a combination of that, creating a rave party where it was possible to talk for example, or it was possible to not have a drop of alcohol and still get a trippy experience out of it. So it was literally a collective of like wacky people from different parts of Europe and the world coming together to do these I would even say like these happenings. There was a whole storytelling behind every single rave party, and a lot of time put into like costume design and getting performers and like lowering the ego of the DJ, moving their booth all around the place. So like it was not like, you know, like more classic rave party. That was the very beginning living in Denmark. Raves.
There's also something about the social inclusion and belonging that's so crucial when migrating to a new place.
Yes.
So it also makes me think of that, like if the nighttime events are a place you find the social inclusion and belonging and connection points.
Yes.
To this new place you're entering.
Like, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, definitely. I like one of the things. So now I have another foreigning for a couple of years with some other friends and colleagues that is called CQ, which is a short name for a long name that is Creative Connections Collective. But we go by CQ because otherwise it's like a multiple surname type of person. You know that it sounds too long,
too complicated,
right? And we work a lot with this idea of social expansion. So instead of like social inclusion, which sounds like there is a given space, a given social space, and we all need to kind of like squeeze a little bit because, here comes a new person, so we kind of need to include them in this space. It's more about this idea of like, how can we expand what is here when somebody new comes?
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of the idea back then with face-to-face, with this forening. We were trying to show that when it comes to having fun and creating meaningful connections, there was so many possibilities that were untapped in Aarhus already, from like using Risco Forest to make a fluorescent party, to using the black box, now the third room in Front Lovene, to make a Egyptian thematic alien thing, where the meta message was like, if you feel that you're weird, you're welcome. You know, you can just come, you can just be, and then just just let people, you know, like work their magic out, so to say. Yeah.
This makes me think a lot about Chaos Pilot parties. I don't know how much you're familiar with Chaos Pilot.
A bit familiar.
A little bit?
Yes.
And that's something that I think it's not a child of its time, but it's a past historical, cultural identity of the Chaos Pilots was that they made a lot of parties.
Yes.
And now I'm going to say something that's might be a little bit provoking to older students.
All right.
But that's like, I have often been like, yeah, but for what? Or like parties, what difference does that make? Like we are in this school, we are here to learn how to have a good impact in the world. Yep. Why should we spend our time on making parties? But this is really making me see it in another light.
Yeah.
Both is about the inclusion expansion, but also the like creative opportunities and like if you're weird, come join. If you're a little bit different, if you think a little bit different, come join.
Absolutely. Even like this whole idea of like nighttime being a place for you just to consume and hopefully to go to bed early is more like first and second industrial revolution. It's more like I'm a worker, I need to wake up tomorrow very early because then I need to go to the factory and to work, or I need to be doing a lot of like at-home work.
Yeah.
Like the nighttime has been since the beginning of humanity a very sacred, very important moment of communion and of celebration and of coping with the harsh realities of nature. So I feel, and what I was saying before is still connected with my work, is because very recently we got a grant for a project that is called Nightlife Boost.
Oh.
And the whole idea is about creating a playground for students in 3 different cities to like research and brainstorm on what is missing in the nightlife scene when it comes to creating easier access to the core of a community. So let's say that you identify as a queer person and you're new to Aarhus. Like, okay, like what is it missing in the nightlife scene that could help you connect with queer communities or to just overlap with other communities as a queer person in a way that maybe is absent now. The same way that maybe we discover that, like a lot of clubs, they actually don't have the proper accessibility in their infrastructure for people that are on a wheelchair to come, right? Like it would be equivalent. So I feel like when it comes to thorny political questions like social inclusion, it can be very refreshing to ask ourselves, how can the nightlife, be a place
Yeah.
help,
Yeah.
so to say.
It's a new perspective for me, at least.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. Yes.
And then, going back to this time when you have recently migrated to Denmark.
Yep.
After or around maybe the same time, then at some point you go and work for something called Actor.
Yes.
And you are a communication and community organizer.
Yes.
For them.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? What is Actor,
sure.
and then what work did you do for them?
Yes. So Actor is actually founded by former Chaos pilots, or by a Chaos pilot alumni called Emil Vincent. The company has gone through different iterations, but the spirit is still the same, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Which is that it was supposed to be an all-in-one toolkit for people working with the different SDGs, more or less leaning towards being activist or not. It could just be people working with SDGs to organize, first of all, to find each other faster and to organize each other better.
So SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes, Sustainable Development Goals. So it could be any SDG, it could be any part in the world. And the whole value proposition was, if you want to use tools out there on the internet, they exist scattered around, but you cannot find them in the same toolbox. So if you want to have a social media with a search engine that actually lets you find people working with specific SDGs in different parts of the world and the ones that you know fast, it's complicated.
Yeah.
If you want to have a way of connecting with them somewhere in between the stiffness of LinkedIn and the intimacy of adding somebody to Facebook, you don't have that place for you to, at least back in 2021. You didn't have. So the whole idea with the company was to accelerate collaboration among people working with SDGs by giving them an all-in-one toolkit. And part of my work was internally to help them condense a message that made sense for specific stakeholders, starting with ourselves, with the small team that we were. And then externally was from making product onboarding, so making short, cute, clear videos on how to use the Actor platform, to charting interesting clients particularly in South America, because of course I speak Spanish and I understand the idiosyncrasy a little bit.
Yeah.
So to be like, hey, who could be networks of networks, which was also a big concept that we're using all the time, networks of networks, how do different networks organize themselves? Where are they and how can we onboard them to the Actor platform? That was my work overall.
And was the platform a worldwide platform?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Back then, like the idea, I think it's still the idea, it had like a global scope and it was very much self-service, so to say. So like the participation from the company in terms of like how the relationships unfold and what is it that people do after meeting each other in the platform, that was very much like their own thing to command, so to say. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Actor.
Yeah, Actor.
A lot of people would say Actor, which branding wise, I think that like somebody would like those years, but it's Actor.
Don't name your company that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that maybe there is a positive twist to making it sound similar to Actor. I don't know. Yeah.
Today, you are working with C-Cube.
Yes.
The association you mentioned before.
Yes.
And you also have something called Aarhus Soup.
Yes, it's one of our main projects.
So Aarhus Soup is a project under C-Cube?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the longest project that we've been doing, besides the podcast, which is a bit more kind of like on demand. Like we use it nowadays primarily to document projects more than to keep it as a standalone, so to say. But like our oldest project otherwise is Aarhus Soup, which is a crowdfunding dinner. It's neighbor-to-neighbor investment, as we call it. The original concept comes from Detroit, the city of Detroit in the States. We adopted it 3 years ago. And since then, we've been also tweaking it so that it serves different purposes than the original that it served in Detroit. And yeah, we've been developing with different funding and with different partners. I've had a chance of inviting other people in Europe to do soups as well and to see what happens when you do soup in other places as well. So Aarhus Soup is kind of like a backbone project for us. Yes, and we try to connect it with the other projects that we do as well, because it's very essential. It's like people coming together to listen to 4 project makers to presenting their ideas in a very analog, minimal way, just using their hands and some pictures, and then they have a chance of asking them questions, giving them feedback, and voting who do I want the whole box of money that we gathered today. Who do I want that money to go to? And we also make it very easy for them to express interest in volunteering for these projects. So to some extent, it's also like an all-in-one toolkit for seed projects. So you might get a little bit of money, you're going to get feedback, you might get some volunteers, and then we support them as well, keeping them in a network of past pitchers, as we call them, where we help them to find funding and to feel that like it's still important that they continue with the project. Yeah.
It sounds like a mini accelerator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
It has like an incubator mindset type of thing. Yeah. 100%.
But C-Cube, you said, was a shorter name for what? Creative Connections Collective.
Yes.
What does that mean? So what does C-Cube do and stand for?
So in the beginning, we were struggling. Myself and the other two co-founders, our friends, we were like struggling with different barriers. One of them, he's Danish, and he, as a musician, he was struggling in finding more grassroots networks that were open to internationals, that they were open to international collaborations, without necessarily being bureaucratic or like state funded and stuff. My other friend, a designer, she was struggling to figuring out where are the creative networks where you can get good jobs or an entrepreneurial piece of advice, or at least some examples of internationals before you that they managed to find a way to live a good life in Aarhus. And in my case, I think that like it was a combination of, on the one hand, feeling, as I still feel nowadays, that Denmark is a great place for people that they want to start things up, that they want to get the pioneer hat in any scale, for any purpose, and to tap things, to create more value than the value that it is here. I was excited by this perception, and also by the fact that, like, compared to many other countries, here cultural and arts, so like civic creativity, it was much more supported, and it was much more respected and also expected by people.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey guys, like I've been just doing these rave parties for social inclusion, like you are from here and you're also struggling with cultural barriers. You are from Hungary, my other friend. You've been studying here, checking all the boxes, and you still feel frustrated. Why don't we do something about it? And the first thing that we did was the podcast, because we didn't know how to go about these barriers. So we were like, hey, let's just start talking with as many interesting people, regardless of their background, as we can, and let's try to ask them similar questions about the field of culture and arts, but also of Denmark in general as a very new multicultural country, because Denmark has not been multicultural for that long, which is another topic that we can discuss. So in the beginning, that was C-Cube, like a question mark about barriers that we just didn't know how to deal with. And this day, I think that we are a platform that helps people to build their life in Denmark, many of them internationals, but also Danish people, through projects, through project making, through having an entrepreneurial mindset, even if you don't consider yourself an entrepreneur, so that you can shift your focus from where are the opportunities that I was promised when I moved into Denmark or when I moved into a new city in Denmark, to how can I start generating opportunities for me and for other people, so that this opportunity that is for me, it's sustainable that way, by being an opportunity for other people as well. Yeah.
An open source in some way.
Very much. Like, imagine that a lot of associations are expected to have members rather fast, because they like this whole idea of like general assemblies and like voting and stuff. And for now, we consider every single person that we manage to include in any of the programs that we do a member. We stay in touch with as many of people as they want to stay in touch, who are making the projects. So it's very much open source. It's more like what we share and what we can offer as an organization is almost 100% what we discovered that we needed to know or that we needed to do for ourselves. So a lot of it is almost, I would say, like mentoring based. It's like, hey, this is how I learned it. I hope that it's useful for you. I'm here to support you, type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being a social entrepreneur.
Yes.
sounds like a very big job title, social entrepreneur.
Right.
Like
Yes.
it's very broad and can be a lot of things. But you're mostly working in like culture in art sector, right?
Yes.
With C-Cube and its projects.
Yes.
Yeah. What are the challenges and opportunities you see within social entrepreneurship these days in Aarhus? Maybe we can start from there.
I think that some of the opportunities, they come from some of the side effects of more conventional entrepreneurship, which is all about, I want to create something for a market, and I want to have clients, and I want to defend a lot of my reason to be a company through income, through profit, right? Maybe you perceive something similar, maybe not, but like I perceive a sense of like tiredness among people when it comes to the Silicon Valley legend. You know what I mean? There is a growing cynicism or skepticism, I would say,
yeah.
about and cynicism coming from Silicon Valley in terms of like how unhealthy it can actually be to try to be a hyper entrepreneur or to present entrepreneurship as something that either aims towards unicorn level or you're basically not worth it. So on the one hand, I feel that people are tilting towards wondering what social entrepreneurship is, because conventional entrepreneurship is gradually becoming a bit unhealthy to be a part of, you know? Yeah. That's one thing. I think that like in the case of Denmark, and to some extent is similar to the Scandinavian countries, to Norway and to Sweden, I consider in a historical moment when it comes to culture, because for most of their history, these regions, they've been primarily monocultural in the sense that like it's been very grassroots. It's been a group of people that they didn't move far away from where they're born and with very, very strong traditions. And now they're challenged, right? Because globalization has different effects, and 2 out of 3 are part of the EU. The 3 of them are part of the Schengen area. So suddenly there are new pressures, political pressures on becoming more multicultural. And of course that like there can be support to this whole process of becoming more multicultural coming from a more for-profit sector. It's good that companies, they make their workforce more international, and that they try to have a more global mindset in terms of like what's their impact. And like you see it in companies like Lego and Maersk and Grundfos. But at the same time, I would say that social entrepreneurship can also connect people that they have talent for entrepreneurial affairs, that they need to have first and foremost social value. And they need to create value before profit, which that does not mean that there shouldn't be an income, or that it shouldn't be professionalized, or that if you are doing a social enterprise and you create profit, you're bad. But that the focus is on like, these people have skills and passion about creating social value first, and then organizing themselves around that. And that, to my eyes, it's also a sign of a region that is challenged to be more multicultural.
Yeah, it also challenges this, what you mentioned in the start, challenges the notion that entrepreneurship should be about gaining profits, and it moves the weight onto the social impact. And that is growingly popular, but it's still a challenge for, I think, many small businesses to have to defend their value, or like, if we're not making a lot of money, then why are you doing it?
Absolutely.
And that's definitely still like a challenge that we're trying to shift mindsets within this world of entrepreneurship.
I would even say it's very common in the civic association, or like civil associations, the inning spectrum, that there is a growing network of people that they have from their experience and their commitment to keep on working in the field professionally, they sense that there are some tools and there are some, I would say, paradigms that are not there in place yet for the whole field to be even much more, quote unquote, productive to the eyes of, for example, the government. For instance, I've met a lot of people, primarily internationals, that they stay in Denmark maybe 2-3 more years from the moment that they start getting frustrated to the moment that they depart, not so much because their sense of, oh, there are better job opportunities for me, or there are new master programs that I really like, has an effect in their patience and in their hope of finding an opportunity to live in here.
Yeah.
But it's primarily their friends. It's primarily what they call here the PEX layer, the growth layer, where most of the cultural associations live in. Is the ecosystem of cultural associations. It is this ecosystem that like somehow makes them have second thoughts about leaving the country. So when it comes to social expansion, there is definitely a lot of potential coming from the PEX layer today if we support talented people in the PEX layer to do what they can do best, which is creating festivals, creating workshops, networks, thinking outside of the box, and creating opportunities for people to feel that there is more than one way to belong to Denmark. Besides your professional life, your studies, and the more conventional sectors, which are still there. And it's a whole synergy, right? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Going back to, this multicultural or newly multicultural society of Denmark. How was it to migrate to Denmark? What was your experience of moving here?
It's been pretty peculiar because in a very short period of time, I've been here since the last like 7.5 years. The city has changed so much in all sort of different layers, from how many more services, governmental services, are available in English.
Okay.
From calling SCAT and being able to press option 2 and getting somebody that speaks good English to tell you how to tax, to being able to go to the border service and like having somebody helping you to understand how city works. So like the Department of Immigration works with a smile in their face and be kind of like, of course that I want to help you. You're a citizen of Denmark. All the way down to, for instance, how the different cultural platforms in the city that, again, they are the go-to place for a lot of migrants in Aarhus, how they've tried to incorporate English to their social media content. They've become more used to collaborate with actors in the cultural sector that they are not from Denmark. It's been changing a lot. I am personally very optimistic about the multicultural process of Denmark because I do feel that it's still very early to be rough in your conclusions about how Danish society is adapting to all these new cultures. But in my personal experience, it's been pretty much mediated from this feeling of, if you want to do things here, you want to do projects, and you want to create things not only for yourself but also for all the people around you, the support is mesmerizing. Like you are gonna get support from a lot of different actors, from governmental actors to non-formal actors to the level of volunteering that we have also in Aarhus, at least. I don't know how it is in Copenhagen or other cities, but at least in Aarhus it's pretty high. It's been mediated by projects and by this feeling of a speeding process of becoming more and more multicultural, and also bigger in size, which is a whole discussion as well among Danes as well. All these buildings that have been built. Yeah. That's also a whole debate. Yeah, the port.
That's always a debate, I think.
Yes. Yes, gentrification. Oof. Let's not even go there. Yes.
You also talk about something you call migrant-led design. What is that? What does that mean?
So with migrant-led design, it's this idea that when it comes to design, which is a very broad word, right? Like design can be so many different things, but in at least in our case in CQ is all about multicultural design. So like, how can we make sure that the content available in the cultural sector, that the language that we speak or the languages that we speak in the cultural sector, that they are migrant friendly, that migrants, they have possibilities to have an impact on how the cultural sector develops. So a lot of the things that we do, even when, again, we are completely open to collaborate with Danish citizens all the time, in reality, a lot of the people that we help through our projects, they are internationals. And a bit of like the motto, the mantra behind involving them in this project has to do with, you can have a design impact in this city. You can lead with design. You can create instead of just say or tell. And I think that it also boils back to an internal mantra that we have in the organization, which is that innovation equals immigration, and immigration equals innovation. So when you're innovating, you're definitely exploring the foreign, you're going beyond some limits. And migration for humans is very, very important as so many other species, like birds, for example. They migrate in order to survive. Migrants should be, in my eyes, most often than not, be received with an expectation of innovation. You're here to optimize something. You're here to challenge some limits that maybe we need to get challenged. You're here to create. You're here to help us adapt, to help us be contemporary.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of migrant-led design, to some extent, is our small conceptual contribution to understanding what is actually relevant innovation in Denmark today when it comes to the social tissue, when it comes to culture, when it comes to arts, when it comes to society at large, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it does.
Nice.
It's a very, it's a fascinating lens to look through, and speaks into also just the general notion of like everything we do is designed by us, the humans.
Yeah.
And we can also impact what we design.
Absolutely.
I think that's very important to keep in mind, that we also have power over our designs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the act of design, as well as a much more effective way of communication between cultures as well, you know, because of course when we are speaking and we are sharing ideas, we are somehow like in a borderline of design, right? Like, but the action of design, at least the way that I understand it, implicitly, it suggests that there is exchange, that there is consensus, that there is an attempt of fleshing something out from the abstract, you know? A project description can be considered design. An open call to a volunteer volunteers can be considered design, right?
Yeah.
Or just like figuring out how to keep a group of people connected as a network can be design. So like migrant-led design is kind of like, on the one hand, a way of suggesting people try to design instead of like claim or argue why there should be more opportunities for international stuff. Try to design, try to get hands-on. And then at the same time, when it comes to like the, you know, like high-level conversations, is that, okay, you know, like instead of like debating about, you know, like what can be the potential risks of, you know, like people not learning Danish, for example, right? Like, oh, damn, you know, like they're not learning Danish. What are we going to do? Okay, you know, like what about framing that in a design question, in a design challenge, instead of like, well, for example, it could be, what incentives are people lacking to learn Danish that we are not aware of?
Yeah.
Right? Because an example could be, well, maybe people are lacking a way of showcasing their Danish skills, because we conduct a small research and we realize that a lot of them, they share experiences about trying to talk with the Rema cashier at the supermarkets, failing in a small accent, and the person automatically going into English, right?
Yeah.
So like you go from like a discussion of abstracts that tend to become very political to a discussion of design, you know, like how can we reframe this already on the question level with a design intention when it comes to migrants, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe changing the perspective, or the starting perspective. It's not why are people not learning Danish, but how can we facilitate their learning, or
or is there something that we don't know, for example? Maybe there is something in the experience that we just don't know, and therefore our existing designs they're not helping out. For example, the job center, which is another topic that is very thorny already among Danes, could also be very interesting. Is one of the spaces where the political conversation about internationals gets very heated. It's like, you know, like internationals, they don't get jobs, and like they're on ACAS and stuff. Let's reframe it on a design question. Like, what could be an improvement that we can do to the process of getting a job consultation that we might not be aware of? And that is the moment where, as in design thinking, like it's kind of like suggested, you include the user, right? Or you include the person that you're trying to serve. So suddenly you're not including the migrant as a person that is just like unemployed and like somehow, you know, like leeching on the system, but instead of like somebody that has experiences and competences that might have not been equated into the existing design or to the process that led to the existing design.
Yeah.
These type of things.
Yeah. Okay, I have one last question.
All right.
Which changes the topic a little bit. But I wanted to ask, what is leadership to you?
Definitely an open-ended concept, leadership, very context-dependent. But I'm inspired. I've been looking into a thinker called Indy Johar that I know that like at least some people in Chaos Pilot School are very fond of.
Okay.
An architect, and like he's a systems thinker. And he talks a lot about what are the ways in which we can avoid collapse as a species. And one of two things that have been resonating a lot in my mind these days. The first one is that we need to do a shift from focusing on where value is consumed to where value is created. And my understanding of that shift is that that talks about two different types of leaderships. The leadership of consuming value and how you organize people around creating value to consume it, sales and like profit, and leadership about creating value. So how do you help people come together to understand how value is created? And in the case of Indy Johar, he goes very much into like living systems and nature and whatnot. So that's definitely one. And the other one that I'm really inspired by him is that in his eyes, we are not necessarily going to act on the different cues and hints that we have on how to avoid collapse because of leadership. It's not going to be as we are used to, that there is a handful of hopefully very brilliant people convincing us and nudging us into changing our behavior towards adaptation, but that instead we're going to be led by events. There will be events that are going to force us to reconsider how we live. And I don't think that means that there won't be any leaders, but the leadership is going to be much more distributed.
Yeah.
So that it will be leadership understood as a group activity more than as an individual or a group of individuals within a larger setting. So to some extent, a bit of like a perfect circle back to social psychology versus individual psychology, moving from like individual leadership to social leadership. How can we all... This has been inspiring my sense of leadership, and I try to be as such in our organization as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a great answer.
Thank you
to a big
very
question.
much. It's been a very nice conversation as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was it for this episode of the Pilot Podcasts. Thank you, Javier, for sharing your story. And to our listeners, stay tuned for more inspiring stories on future episodes. Thank you.